So I was going through my DeviantArt gallery the other day and I came across a photo of a character I created years and years ago. I've been drawing her inconsistently for a while, but the last time I did a digital piece of her, like with shading and color and all that fun stuff, was December 2019. I keep wanting to say November because originally I thought the piece was last done in November, but it wasn't. It was December and I'm just being silly. I realized I hadn't done a digital piece of her recently, so I figured now was probably a good time to redraw her. So I'm going to start by critiquing my old work. When I look back at the piece, I don't think it's actually too bad considering what I was working with that year, but that doesn't mean that not bad means that it wasn't like really messy when it came to certain areas and that there's not a lot that I had to fix. For one thing, the line art is very rigid. There's a lot of corners and lines that meet in spots that don't make any sense. One example is the left shoulder. So if you look at the left shoulder, one line meets in the middle and then another line kind of forms the rest of the shoulder, and honestly that makes absolutely no sense. So you would think that like shoulders would for the most part just be one flowy line that kind of emphasizes the pose the shoulder is in. I find a lot of my line art, and especially in the earlier days, is a lot more rigid. Like nowadays there's still a lot of problems with it, but I find that there's less problems in relation to like the problems I had before. So there's that. There's also varying line thickness that makes absolutely no sense. So I'm still learning about line thickness. Line thickness isn't something that I have especially gone out of my way to like grasp, because I kind of like do things as I kind of can wrap my head around it. So like the other day I went online, and after I finished this piece I did some additional research on art and color theory. So because I was like, I'm sitting here, I need a break and stuff, and I wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about digital art and digital color theory. So I did a little bit of research on that. So there's that. But yeah, line thickness isn't something I've looked up yet. I have asked some friends about line thickness, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So the next issue I found is the hair color, which is kind of yellow. So like that works for like cartoons and all that. But one thing I'm trying to like aspire to do one of the reasons why I use a lot of references and try to use the references to like get as accurate as possible is I really want to do cartoon realism eventually, which is like it's cartoons, but it's like more on the realistic side. So that's kind of not really gonna work, I think, with the yellow. You'll note later that I tried to make it like more closer to blondish in this updated version, though I still feel like I have to work on that a little bit more. The shading is also very minimum. There's like no contrast in the piece. Midtones kind of don't offer any kind of transition to the shadows. Shadows are also very hard to distinguish. Plus I feel more areas would be lit up from the light source, if not like highlight level, then it would still be somewhat bright. I also feel like there aren't really any highlights. Like there's these really bright areas, but I feel like one highlight would kind of help. I also noted when I was looking at the new piece later, I also kind of forgot to add an additional highlight because I'm trying to get away from using the shader, but in this one I used the shader in Krita and I really don't like it that much anymore, so I've been trying to get away from it. But it's something I forgot to add in was a additional highlight. Another thing that I noticed, and it was something I noticed quickly right after I finished it, was the left arm. The left arm isn't quite proportioned right. It should be a little bit longer. The top part kind of ends a little too soon. So that's one thing I probably should have gone in and fixed, but I didn't notice it until after I finished. And once I finish a piece, I don't go back to it except to critique it. So I try to move on once I finish something, or once I'm done with it and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Another thing I'd like to mention is that the pose in the piece is a little kind of boring. Doesn't really offer any information about the character's personality, which you'll see in the picture now that this one kind of does offer a little bit more about her personality, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little while. Another thing is the approach to the character curves and anatomy is, again, very rigid, and it's not as loose as it probably should be. I feel like it would be better if it was more curvy and like not like these lines just ending like randomly here, like straight line, and then suddenly we go out over here. I feel like if this was like one like curvy, more curvy lines rather than just a straight line, it probably would look better. One last thing I'd like to mention, because let's be honest, I could probably analyze this photo all day and tell you all these issues with it, so I'm just going to kind of end the negativity issue thing now, is the clothing corners look really weird. Like, they should wrap around the arm and other parts of the body, but they don't. They just kind of sit there like weird little cylinders. And I think I fixed that for the most part in the new piece. And all that stuff. So with all that consideration about the old piece, after critiquing it for like, I don't know, who knows how long, I did make some changes to the character. For one, I drew her in a pose that emphasizes a little more about the character's personality. The character is actually quite shy, and I felt this pose better represented it in the piece. I still think that it requires some development, because though you can tell she's shy, simultaneously I think there probably should be like a background, and there should be kind of like a full out picture to describe it a little bit better. So maybe in the future, when my backgrounds aren't as crap, I'm working on it, I promise, then maybe we could redo this again maybe next year and see if we can add a background and try to emphasize some things and all that. Right now I'm currently experimenting with different light sources, but I have a really long way to go. It's something I'm having a difficult time grasping in a couple areas. Like, the most significant issue is how the colored light changes the colors of the individual in the piece. So like, for example, she has a green skirt, so how would like orange light change the color of her green skirt? Like, how would it alter it? Because you would still need to see and know, hey, this skirt was green in some, like, depending on the situation, but in some situations you would still see that the skirt is green, but you'd also see the orangey tint. So it's like, okay, how do I change that? And all that stuff. So right now I'm using layer modes. Like, I don't remember if it's lighten or overlay for like for the like bright parts, and then for the shadows I use multiply, but I don't use either layer at like full capacity. I use it at like 60-50%, something like that, because I don't want like it turning the piece black or anything. That wouldn't work really well. So, speaking of colors, you'll notice that the colors and shadows are really saturated, which is a big mistake on my part. If you are new to my channel and you haven't watched, I've only been doing digital art for like a year or something, but before digital art, like, which was January 2019, which was when I started, I only sketched in my sketchbook a little bit, and I didn't really spend a lot of time dedicated to like improving my art. That was just something that I did in response to an assignment, and that I kind of kept up with once the assignment was done. But that's another video. I don't really want to get into that. You're not here to listen to me talk about that and all that stuff. But the same day I finished this piece, I took a break, like I said earlier, and researched more on like color theory and digital art. Even though color theory like applies to everything, when you do digital art, there's bigger palette that's kind of available to you. And I kind of discovered that the amount of saturated and undersaturated colors in a piece is dependent on what you're drawing. One example that they gave in the article was that highly saturated colors, when people see it, they think more cartoony or whatever. But as I said earlier, I am aiming for more like cartoon realism, so I felt like higher saturated probably wouldn't work as well for a piece like this. I didn't go in and change it because, like I said earlier, once I finish a piece and I declare it to myself that it's done, it's done. Like I'm done with the piece. Like I'll post it everywhere I need to, social media, DeviantArt, and then I move on. And then whatever I learn after, I'll like apply it to future pieces and all that stuff. So I didn't go back and fix it. I kind of experimented here. One thing that the article also noted was that higher saturation in NAPs can be used to draw in the observer. One thing I like to experiment with, I was talking with a friend about this, is using high saturation and low saturation in sunset photos. So using high saturation for like the light and a lot of like the sun and all of the light, I guess, which is what I just said. I can't believe I'm repeating myself again. And using that to draw the reader in, and then using some undersaturated for like the clothes and like just the shadow parts, like not the deep shadow, coarse shadow, but just some of the shaded parts, and seeing how that would work, just because, you know, I like experimenting things. So bottom line though, from the vibe I got from the article, and if you're a professional and you have experience with this and you have knowledge about this, please correct me if I'm wrong. It depends on the piece. Like I said, I did an experiment with another piece. I'm not sure if the next piece I finished will be the next video, because it's also a redraw, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, that little spiel is over. I did change the color of the skirt because I wanted to create some kind of color palette, and I felt the green would work better. That black pelt thing that you see in the middle between the shirt and the skirt was actually, like, in the video game, it's really, really thick, and I felt like it was too thick. Since I was trying to proportion it down a little bit, I felt it would be more appropriate to make it a lot smaller, so that's what I ended up doing. I didn't want it to feel very, like, chunky and all that stuff. So another thing I'd like to note is I've also tried to kind of change how I do hair. Before I kind of just chunked it and left it, and I guess I kind of am still doing that in the piece, but I did try to make it a little bit more flowy and all that stuff. I know for my process, you probably noticed that, I'm not sure if I did it in this one, but I know I did it in the next one for sure. I color the sketch, and then I kind of delete that layer after I palette everything and then redo it. The only reason I color this sketch is because it kind of shows me all the mistakes I made. But yeah, that's pretty much this piece. It's like, looking back on it, there are a lot of things I would change about it, and it's definitely something I need to work on. But I feel like I'm starting to grow a lot. Oh yeah, forgot about this. So I'm just gonna veer away in a moment. So, like, I grayscaled this as an experiment because I was watching one of Draw Jazz's videos, and he was showing how he grayscales in like he was talking about how to draw backgrounds, and he grayscaled his background to kind of, I guess, from what I understood, with what I saw, because I was also doing work at the time, so I was half listening. He kind of does it to kind of separate, like, you kind of put all the different areas in perspective, and you add depth, and you kind of separate everything and see where it exists in the photo. So I started adding the grayscale. I did the grayscale and tried coloring in just the grayscale because I could see the colors were still kind of popping up. The only difference was that I physically couldn't see the color. Another thing I started doing in this video was I started adding a bit of a backlight. I guess kind of like a bounce light, but I'm pretty sure bounce lights looked a little different, but I wanted to add a backlight because I felt like it enhanced the form of the picture. and all that stuff. Yeah, there are a couple things that I really am not proud of, like I said earlier, but like I feel like this piece is much better than the older one, even if it does have a lot of flaws and stuff, and I'm really proud of how far I've come in the short period of time. Anyway, yeah. So if you guys like what you see, please subscribe and comment. If there's any kind of videos you want to see, let me know. I've got a couple things planned in my head. So like learning things through Skillshare and making a video about all the things that they talk about in the videos and then trying them out, using it to learn and blah, 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 blah. Doing some more redraws. I want to do traditional art. My problem is I'm not very good at it. I don't know why. I think I just don't have that much patience. I know the one traditional art piece I did, someone didn't like it, so they did a thumbs down. I'm going, oh, I'm sorry. So like, if you guys want to see anything, just let me know. And all that stuff. I also have an Instagram account and a DA account. I'll post everything, like all my social media, down in the comments. No, not in the comments, in the description below. Thank you guys for being so patient with me, and I hope you stick around and all that stuff.